Arigato gozaimasu, Toasters and Moshers. That's Japanese for thank you, and welcome back to the podcast. I'm Charles, and this is a redo. Howdy ho.
Howdy ho!
Everybody might be scratching your head wondering, redo, what's going on here? So essentially I had recorded this episode the night before this, but I guess somehow the settings on my microphone got fucked up without me knowing. I don't remember myself because I very rarely ever touch this microphone, but it ended up messing up the audio recording. So here I am to come at you
Again.
And in this week's podcast, we are going to be delving into a tasty, spacey strain by the name of Space Daddy. And as far as our music appreciation section, we're going to be covering MySpace deathcore legends and metalcore as Blood Runs Black. Kicking it off with our cannabis education section, the first little ditty here about Space Daddy is that this is a very new strain to the cannabis world, and by very new I mean maybe within the past year and a half or so. And this was first bred and cultivated by an Illinois company called Cresco Labs, and specifically they are out of the city of Joliet. Cresco Labs goes on record to say that this strain is an even 50-50 hybrid. I myself would agree with that. I get a nice overall euphoric and relaxation feeling, and I actually used this strain just the other day to combat a bad migraine I had, and that came in clutch because I was knocked out for a good chunk of the day that day, and once I woke up from a little nap, I smoked some of this once my headache had come down from that nap, and smoking the Space Daddy just completely relieved that. So expect to get some of that migraine relief or headache relief from this guy, but we'll get to that when we get to our medicinal benefits. When looking at the terpene profile for Space Daddy, we're going to see that the most commonly found terpenes are going to be caryophyllene, and that's going to be that peppery scent and taste. And then we're going to see linalool, and that's going to give us a lavender and overall floral scent. And the last but not least terpene we're going to see is myrcene, and that's going to give us our herbal and earthy tones. When looking up the THC average range for this strain, guys, I actually was able to find it straight off of Cresco's website, where they have the range listed as 22 to 25%. I will say within my personal batch, I see a bit higher of a percentage than that average, and that is going to be with my THCA at 27.72%, and then I'm going to have regular THC at 0.39%, so barely even half of a percent. And as far as my CBD content, and it just seems like this is going to be the case for the most part when it comes to most of the strains that I get, there's no CBD content in this guy. Kind of a bummer because I feel like the CBD would be helpful to aid and kind of lend a bit of a booster to those terpenes that are already working. And actually, now that I think about it, I know that there are CBD-specific strains, so you know what? Maybe going on in the future, I'll start to pick out a couple of those as time goes on and start reviewing a bit of those, because why should CBD be left out? It does just as much of the work and helps just as much as THC, except obviously, it doesn't give you that psychoactive effect. Anybody out there who's listening, Toasters and Moshers, if you think I should start throwing some CBD strains in here, I'll take a look at my dispensaries around the area and see what they got, and we'll start throwing some of those in, and we can help you guys out with some CBD stuff. What you can expect as far as most common flavors and scents from Space Daddy: you can expect some sweet, you can expect some fruity and citrusy, and a little bit of candy, which that's what Cresco has kind of listed on their website, but I feel candy goes hand in hand with sweet because candy is sweet. Sometimes it could be bitter, but I don't know. I just feel like that kind of goes hand in hand, so I don't know why they necessarily put that. But I would say definitely, as far as for me, when it comes to first ripping it and the inhale, I definitely get some of that sweeter taste, but on the exhale, I get more of that linalool and myrcene coming in with the herby and floral scents and tastes. Most common and notable effects you can expect out of Space Daddy: you can expect to feel relaxed and calm. You can expect to feel some mild pain relief depending on what you're trying to use this for. And you can feel some slight euphoria, which I kind of put in parentheses after uplifting. Nothing crazy, just kind of brings your mood up, a mood elevator, I guess you could say. When we look at medicinal benefits, we can expect, like I said, some pain management. And I had mentioned I used this for my migraine, and it really did help. I even had tried before I got to the Space Daddy, and before I had gotten to that nap even, I had tried quite a couple different strains, hoping that they were going to help out, because they've helped me with other types of pain management, but obviously the brain and migraines aren't the same as, arthritis and my knees or my ankle pains, what have you. I ended up coming back to Space Daddy, and that ended up being the one that helped me. Unfortunately, I smoked the rest of what I had, so R.I.P. Other than the pain relief, we can expect some relief of anxiety and depression as well. And again, that's going to come from that euphoric and the uplifting effect of the strain. Space Daddy has a lot to offer medicinally, as we have seen, and we're about to find out why as we segue into our lineage breakdown. Coming into this lineage breakdown, as we look at the direct parent strains of Space Daddy, we are going to see that is going to be a cross of LA Pop Rocks, and we're going to take that and mix it with a little Sugar Daddy. Number 2. When we strip this down a bit more and we look at LA Pop Rocks by itself, we can actually see this is going to be a 3-way cross, and I feel like this is where a lot of the fruitiness, a lot of the sweet, and a lot of the citrusy tastes of this strain come from. And when we look at it, LA Pop Rocks is going to be a cross of Skittles, Animal Cookies, and Triangle Kush. For myself personally, I will say I have had all of these 3 separately. So Skittles by itself, Animal Cookies by itself, and Triangle Kush by itself. And these 3 independently, they are all really good strains. Skittles is a very euphoric, as if you can't tell by the name Skittles, it's very fruity tasting, which again, that's where you're kind of going to get the sweet and that candy taste for Space Daddy here. Triangle Kush, I actually have right now a form of Triangle Kush. I think it's Lemon Triangle Kush, and that's a really sweet one. And now that I'm thinking about it, I think I'll do a little bit of that as the podcast goes on. Maybe I'll throw that in within the next couple episodes. But yeah, these 3 definitely are going to lend hand to that sweet and the more uplifting and euphoric effect. But now, as we look at that second strain that makes up Space Daddy, being Sugar Daddy number 2, we're going to see a 2-way cross, and it's going to be a little bit more simple. It's going to be California Indica, and we're going to cross that with Sugar Blossoms. I can't really say too much about what makes up this strain because I've never had California Indica, nor have I had Sugar Blossoms, but I would imagine California Indica being the closest to a land race, I guess a state race strain, if you will, at that point. And usually strains that come from a specific area or climate kind of have a more overwhelming sense of the effect, more so. And obviously being an indica, that's probably where you get a lot of the myrcene and the pain management coming from this Sugar Daddy. So yeah, guys, that's going to pretty much do it for the lineage breakdown, and in just a general sense, that's going to be the end of our cannabis education section. So hold on tight, guys. We got a very, very fun one for you today. Coming to you in our music appreciation section this week is As Blood Runs Black.
Why look dead children of a broken heart when it's made of stone? Why? If I just hurt my love, would make yourself so cold.
I just want to go ahead and preface before I get into this for you guys that there's a lot of juice to come out of this one, and this band has a lot going on, and there was some controversies, and it's gonna get juicy. It's gonna get wild. So hold on tight. As Blood Runs Black was founded and first came on the scene in 2003 out of Los Angeles, California. As far as a current status for you guys, it's kind of up in the air and unsure. We'll get there a little bit further into the segment. Ultimately, all I know is I was able to find through my research that in 2021, the drummer Lech and longtime bassist Nick Stewart, they had posted a video of them doing a playthrough of something new they had supposedly written, or wrote, I should say, pardon me guys, and wanted feedback. They said they were going to be doing more, but I kept looking around and didn't really find too much of anything. If any of you Toasters or Moshers out there have any deets about what this band's doing, any inside info, or just can point me in the right direction, let me know. Hit me up. Shoot me some comments. When it comes to a genre for this band, we are going to say that they are metalcore with some influences of deathcore and melodic. Now, before getting into the whole original and current lineup, I will say that this is a very sporadic and sloppy, lots of going on, member changes all over the place, and I'm not going to go through all of them, but I will say in general that 6 of those were just vocalist changes alone, so there you go. Getting into this, the original lineup we see when the band was formed was Christopher Bartholomew, and that was the vocalist. We're going to see, or I apologize, but guys, my bad, I was reading from the current. Let me
strike that, reverse it.
Original lineup is going to be Louis Revolcaba, vocals. Also, we're going to see a second vocalist named Enrique Martin. Next on lead guitar, we're going to see Kyle Hassenstab. And then as rhythm guitarist, we're going to see Bajan Roybal. And then on bass, we have Richard Reyes. And on drums, and pretty much the only original and long-standing member of the band, drummer Hector Lech de Santiago. And now looking at the current lineup, or what it was supposedly when they got back together or announced that they were going to supposedly be doing stuff back in 2021, we're going to see Christopher Bartholomew on vocals, Greg Kirkpatrick on rhythm guitar, Nick Stewart on bass, and of course Lech still on drums. See a big shift going from a 6-piece in the beginning to a 4-piece at the end. What a difference. Now it would seem that as Blood Runs Black has had quite the rocky and bumpy history in a general sense. As I had mentioned, they had gone through a ton of member changes, with just 6 of them being the vocalist changes, and then also they were screwed over by their record label, Media Scare, who they released their first 2 albums from, or through I should say, and they were also screwed over by various band members, and I mean various, especially those vocalists are really the ones who fucked them over, and yeah, we'll get there, guys. Previously mentioned, Lech, the drummer, is the only original member to exist within the band now and throughout the band's career. Started in his own basement, as Blood Runs Black was created from the remains of a previous band Lech had joined called Broken Stems, and he had joined this after the original drummer had parted ways with the band. So essentially, after practicing with Lech a few times, the band just decided to rename itself to As Blood Runs Black. Nothing crazy. And with the birth of this new band, they went on to start demoing some stuff, and I'm pretty sure My Fears Have Become Phobias was a demo on MySpace back in the day, in Dying Days, Strife, Chug Chug, and I think there was one other one, and those all come from what would end up being their first release via, like I said, Media Scare, Allegiance, and the vocalist on the album at that time would end up being Chris Blair. That being said, we are going to dive into our discography breakdown and just in general the analysis of these albums and how we're going to rank them. So let's get into it. Very small discography for his Blood Runs Black, only 3 albums, and they were all pretty spanned far apart. We're going to see, as I had mentioned, Allegiance in 2006 being their first album. Second album, Instinct, being released all the way 5 years later in 2011. And their third and final album as of this time period now, where we here are in time space.
Taken in conjunction with what we know about the expansion of the universe, this brings us to a fascinating possibility. That maybe what we experience as one point in time-space could actually be a legion of points, which would mean that your curtains and little Sputnik's pee-pee could be as distant from one another as we are from the furthest galaxy.
Ground Zero, and that dropped in 2014. A little bit of my own history with this band before we get into the discography analysis. I have been listening to this band since the MySpace days when those demos were out. They were, as far as I'm concerned, one of the bands back then who really paved the way and who kind of lent hand to modern day metalcore and melodic metalcore, slight deathcore. Kind of influenced some of the music I write today and what I'm doing for my project Dead. And I think you guys, hopefully, I think you guys will enjoy them just as much, and you'll see how good of a band they really are and what they bring to the table. When I originally recorded this episode last night, I had said that Ground Zero, their most recent third album, was number one by just a hair. And now I'm really thinking about it, now that I'm here and having to re-record, and I've had some time to think about the albums again and whatnot leading up until this recording. I do my recordings at night in my car, and I'm just gonna put their first and their third album right at the same level. They're just, for their own reasons, they're fantastic. They really are. Their first album, Allegiance, has some really interesting guitar tones, very squeaky. Not super squeaky, I shouldn't say that, but the production value, I feel, adds a little bit more to the squeakiness, but the production value isn't anything too over the top as far as how crisp and clear it sounds. There's bangers on that album. My Fears Have Become Phobias. In Dying Days, the first two full tracks off the album after the intro. You have albums, or songs at the end of the album, I should say, like Beneath the Surface and Legends Never Die. I personally will say I really enjoy the vocalist at this time, Chris Blair, and I feel for what their music is, and for the most part, all the albums kind of have that same general, just their sound. They use Blood Runs Black, riffy, tremolo picking metalcore sound. But the vocalist at that time for that first record, I feel his vocals just went the best with the music compared to all of them. But then you have Ground Zero, and I feel like it's good, or just as good, and right there on par with Allegiance, because you have kind of different and more what seems dialed in guitar tones. And actually, I'll play a little track for you here off of Ground Zero. I'll throw a little bit of their self-titled song, Ground Zero. Check it out. Yeah, you really hear the tubes here and how they really pack a punch. And just for a comparison, I'll give you guys a little bit of Legends Never Die from their first album, Allegiance. Take a listen. But then what's also so different from Allegiance that's on and going on within Ground Zero is they're very experimental on this album. They use a lot more clean parts, and you hear a lot more effects as far as phaser or chorus maybe on the guitar, kind of more ballady stuff with more heartfelt solos, kind of like, that classic rock, big arena type band solo. But then, as I said, they have bangers like Ground Zero, and that comes out of the gate really strong. The intro in itself to the album is pretty sick. I'll throw a little clip of that in right here. To touch on more of that softer side and what I was describing with the guitars, I'm going to give you a bit of their song Rumple here. Let me know what you think. Definitely a little different, well, more different compared to that first album and what they originally came on the scene busting a nut with. These two albums, like I said, for each of the I feel like the production with this new one or more recent one was a little bit better too, a lot more toned in, and it seemed like it made it a lot more clear to the point where it wasn't too sharp in your ears and gave it that glassy inflection. And there was even some vocal parts that I wouldn't say, like I said, for me, I just personally enjoy the first vocalist on that first album the most, Chris. But on this album, for sure, the vocalist they had, Christopher Bartholomew, I believe it was, he does some interesting stuff where he's not clean singing and not completely screaming, but this kind of like tonal yelling, if that makes sense. And I feel that really fits with the music at the time. And that's why I feel it's a very good album for itself, because it's one thing to start writing and being experimental and straying from the path of what you're used to and what fans are used to hearing, especially with changing your vocalist out so many times. If you don't have a vocalist, like in Psyopus and Ion Dissonance, when they ended up getting new vocalists for the end of their career spans or the last couple albums or last album, I feel that that doesn't work if you don't have a vocalist that, especially if you're going to change again your sound and try to be different, if you don't have someone that fits that, it's not going to be a good record. They do a good job. The vocalist does a great job. And for that, I just feel that Allegiance and Ground Zero are at a peak, and they both are very good in their own respects, and I don't think I could put one above the other. That leaves us then with their only other release and their second release, Instinct. I will say about this album, not that I didn't like it or I don't think it's a good album, it has that very classic metalcore As Blood Runs Black feel and very reminiscent of the album before. You see a little bit more ingenuity and a little bit more creativity with the riffs that they pull out on this one, like in songs of In Honor. I'll throw in a little clip right here. But on this album, the production just isn't that great. It kind of sounds muddied out. And because of that, I feel it adds to the guitar tones not sounding as good as they could. The guitar tones sound a little bit scratchy and not as clear as they could be. There's some pretty cool little bass tapping parts in this album that I enjoy. The bass player for this band has always been good. Nick Stewart, he's a great bass player. The drummer, Lech, always pulling out some great parts. And I will have a little bit of an honorable mention coming up in our Riffs of the Week section regarding him, and that's going to be a little treat for y'all. Other than that, not too much to say about Instinct. It's just pretty straightforward of an album, and I feel with the production and the guitar tones at the time, it wasn't the best that they could have done, and just doesn't sit comfortably with me. Coming out of our discography analysis, a little bit on the supposed breakup, which would be a hiatus, because they come back in 2021, they said.
You know, where everything has a question mark at the end of it, with an upward inflection at the end of every sentence.
But a little to touch on that, I guess drummer Lech took to social media in August of 2014 to announce that the band would be coming to its untimely end, and eventually they would do a tour to support that new album Ground Zero, and that would pretty much bada bing bada boom, that's it. They're out. Now let's delve into some interesting facts about this band, and then we'll get into a little bit of that juicy controversy that I was telling you guys about. First little fact I have is that their one vocalist, he was only in there for maybe about a year from what I remember in the interviews that I read and watched. Sonic Garcia, he was originally their merch guy from 2006 to 2008, and apparently I believe it was around the time of 2012 or 2011, 2012, when Instinct came out. They were on a tour with Oceano, and as Blood Runs Black, the rest of the guys had to find out from the other bands on the tour that their vocalist just up and left. He was not feeling it. I guess he was under pressure, feeling the pressure, and didn't tell any of the guys, packed his bags, and just zip, zap, zoop-a-da-bop. He got on out of there. Yeah, so that left the guys in a little bit of a pickle, so they called up their old merch guy, Sonic, and he came out right away. The night that he flew in, he went straight to playing a show, and they said it was a banger of a show. Getting into this juicy controversy, back in 2014, when the band was getting ready to prepare for the making of Ground Zero, they actually previously had left Media Scare because of the bullshit that had gone on apparently with them, and that being the case, they were going to furtherly independently release their Ground Zero album. With that, they took to the crowdfunding site Indiegogo, which essentially, if you guys don't know what crowdfunding is, people can donate money, use it. You offer perks as the band or the artist or whoever you are. You offer perks that once your goal's met and you get the money to do what you want to do with it, that you give the people who supported you these extra perks, and as well as whatever the product or whatever it is that they're trying to get help with funding, blah, blah, blah. Album was set to release in mid to late October, and it did that year, and only a couple weeks later, a lot of people, fans of the bands, I should say, took to social media because they were claiming they were being ripped off by the band. So in the Indiegogo campaign, they were offering, first and foremost, anybody who donated, bottom line, would get the album a week before it comes out, a download link. They could download it. They get a week early access. But depending on what tier or how much you donated, you got stuff like signed merch, not signed merch, but merch, signed posters, drumsticks, what have you, and apparently a lot of people weren't receiving these perks. As this went on and got the band's attention, the band took to social media, I believe Facebook, to make a statement, and this is where things kind of heat up. So everybody's saying, I'm not getting my stuff, screw this band, they're just out here ripping people off, blah, blah, blah. Then people go on to say, after they apologize and they make their statement, that, they're just being assholes, they responded terribly, and they don't care about the fans, this and that. But for me personally, I found the statement and I read it. For the situation, given what it was, I feel like they did the best they could to try to resolve things going further from that point, and they got chewed out for no fucking reason. When they made their statement on Facebook, they essentially let people know, hey, we're currently in the middle of a tour right now. We do apologize for whatever mishaps might be going on. We entrusted these perks and this whole situation to a third party who's supposed to send those out for us while we're, doing our thing as an independent band and touring. And apparently that third party fell through and ended up not fulfilling what they were supposed to, and that's why a bunch of people did not get their stuff. In addition, at the end of the statement, they even went on to say, anybody who hasn't received their perks, here's an email address. You can send us an email with the topic line, something about not having the perks, and, they said, we'll figure this out one way or another, and we'll get you your stuff. Now, to me, that seems like a very good way to go about it. It didn't seem like they were being assholes, and people were just making comments and saying, they're just giving away their email and saying, well, you should be the ones who are really out there, reaching out to these people and blah, blah, blah. But here's the thing, especially, I imagine most fans of bands, especially smaller bands like that, aren't really musicians for the most part. I mean, they might be, but overall, I feel like most people don't really understand, especially when it comes to being a DIY band or artist or musician. There's a lot that really goes into it. And that being the case, there's a lot to manage. You're your own managers. And Lech, the drummer, like I said, he was pretty much the face of the band, and he was working with everything. So one man can only really do so much, And I feel for being an independent band at that point and doing things on their own, they're doing what they could, because they can't help at the end of the day if this third party, they built up all this stuff, they started the campaign, they started recording the album, and this company said, yeah, you know, when the time comes that we need to ship out these perks, we'll ship them out, and we got you guys. But obviously they didn't do what they were supposed to, and fans can't get mad at a band for that. I say, fuck the fans. You're just being petty and selfish at that point. Now that we got all that bullshit out of the way, we can get a little bit into the riffs, you know what I'm saying? So let's hit the riffs of the week, guys, and I'm going to pull out a couple for you this week. I'm going to give to you guys, I'm going to pull from their first album, Allegiance, and I'm going to give you something out of the song Beneath the Surface, which is one of my personal favorites. And now for that little treat. Technically, it's not a guitar riff, but I just need to give it up to Lech. This guy is one of the best drummers I've personally ever heard, and at the time, I just felt like he was the best for the metalcore scene. And the pedal and the footwork that he could do, and his blast beats are so clean, his rolls are so technical and clean. Most importantly, when I first heard the song, My Fears Have Become Phobias, there is a breakdown at the end where that kick pedal, he just goes off. And I'm going to play that for you guys here. If that didn't turn your brain into shit, I really don't know what else will. I mean, I can move my feet pretty fast and I can play double pedal pretty fast, but that's just, you're fucking unhuman, dude. You're beast. Now that we've got all the aggression and the anger out of our system for this Monday, Toasters and Moshers, let's settle down a bit, take a toke off of our chillum, and chill them out. This week I have picked a song for you Toasters and Moshers called Kazoku ni Naroru Yo, and that in English translates to Let's Become a Family. And this is going to be by New Age and classical guitarist and composer Yoshihiro Koseki. This song is going to be from his album Popular Hit Repertory for Guitar Solo, and this was released not too long ago in 2016. Well, gang, another episode stamped and mailed. As always, I want to say thank you, and I appreciate the ears that this podcast falls upon. I really mean it, guys. This has turned into something I very much enjoy doing, and I feel like I should express that a little bit more. So thank you from the bottom of my heart to the people who are out there listening, and feel free to contact me and hit me up on social media. I don't bite, and I love to meet new people and chat. And to do so, I will put all my links in the show notes in the description below, where you guys can keep up with all the happenings here at the Riffs and Spliffs podcast. And with that being said, stay toasty, my friends.